It is scientific because you're actually using nature. A lot of them uses the moon cycle. There's yakshas, there's bhutas, there's also the ancestors that have been here on this land before. There's nature spirits. This is in the blood of the Balinese to protect their culture and to protect their tradition because this is the sole purpose of them moving to Bali in the first place.
This video is an excerpt of my show, The Forgotten Essence of Indian Culture and Temples, that airs live on iHeartRadio via Ruckus Avenue Radio. I grew up in the US, but my longing to know more about my roots took me back to India for over a decade, where I discovered there's much more than most people realize. In this video, we have Dr. Ravinjay, teacher of Hinduism, Balinese culture, and anthropology in Indonesia.
These are all things I think are important to teach the next generation so that it continues. We're becoming a very logical population in the whole planet. If you have any insights into the science behind it that can be explained for, say, a 15, 16-year-old who's like, why should I do this?
This is actually a really interesting perspective because we really don't have that sort of perspective in Indonesia at all. I find that to be more of a Western paradigm where everything needs to be justified with science and with logic. In Indonesia, for example, especially in Bali, to this very day, most Indonesians, including myself, we see it more as this is how our people have always been. This is how our culture has always been. There's no need to put logic or to question it. And I think that's really what's different with the Western mindset or the white mindset with the Asian mindset of really seeing things more holistically, right? We don't like to take a ritual and then cut it into different pieces. We don't want to see how every single element of the ritual correlates in science. We like to see the ceremony as a whole. We like to see the purpose of the ceremony, the output of the ceremony, including all of its various parts and pieces as one unit. And we see how the entirety of the ceremony, how it's then useful for a modern purpose. For example, the ceremonies are meant to ensure fertility. The rice are then produced well, and a lot of them uses the moon cycle, nature. So it is scientific because you're actually using nature. It's hacking bioscience, I guess. It's just hacking what's already existing to make sure that you get what you need from the crops that you're planting. It's very different from how a lot of Indian Hindus, I think, view their own religion, trying to justify it with an apologetics of science. And I find value in that for sure, because obviously the West is becoming a dominating culture. Western science and academia is becoming more and more credible with its research and with its existence, and I have full respect for that. I have never really come across any other Balinese that's actually looking at it from that perspective or that angle. A lot of us would simply see these rituals as culture, as harmony. The thing that's really unique with Bali, especially, and with Indonesia as a whole, is that we believe that we're not living here alone, that there's other creatures that live side by side with us humans. There's yakshas, there's bhutas, there's also the ancestors that have been here on this land before. There's nature spirits, and there are the gods, the devas, which are gifting us these gifts of nature. There's obviously ourselves and our families that we need to take care of. So how best to do something that benefits everyone? Ritual offerings are seen that way instead of it being seen as something to be justified with science, if that makes sense. How can we be grateful to them for what they have given us? The shelter, the food, the clothing, the money that we can then make having a land for business. How can we integrate the seen and the unseen worlds? It's not really seen as something for the human to benefit from. It's seen as how the human can integrate into the bigger picture of the universe.
I work regularly with Hindu Americans in USA, in Canada, my own cousins, my own friends. They need explanation as to why they should continue their tradition. Immense respect for Balinese Hindus for keeping that up.
It's not really an apple-to-apple comparison with an Indian that has immigrated into the States with an Indian that's living somewhere in the village in the foothills of the Himalayas. They are not living in the same context, and they don't have the same needs anymore, like the Navajo tribes or the natives of Canada, indigenous of the Amazons and of South America. They have a very similar perspective as the Balinese of how rituals are because they are in their land. Land is seen as sacred. I think you lose this when you move to New York or when you move to Ohio or Arizona. You tend to kind of lose the sanctity of land. This is what natives or indigenous don't necessarily lose because they are always in their ancestral home, in their ancestral land. And in that way, they see its sanctity and they see its importance, and they don't need to justify it because for them, it's them respecting their land. And if you lose your land and you move abroad, you have to respect yourself because that's the only thing you're carrying, right?
How did Balinese Hindus sustain this level of integrity of their traditions in spite of this brutal invasions and unspeakable kind of atrocities? I almost felt that Bali is in its own like cocoon.
Java used to be the center of Hinduism, the beating heart of Hinduism in maritime Southeast Asia, along with parts of Cambodia, present-day Vietnam, and Thailand. Eventually, with the conquest of different kingdoms that come and go in Java, the Javanese kingdoms would make their way to Bali, where they then learned about the indigenous religions of Bali and live side by side with it. So Bali has always been a safe haven since the 16th century for culture to live and be extended on. And this is pretty much in the blood of the Balinese to protect their culture and to protect their tradition, because this is the sole purpose of them moving to Bali in the first place, to make sure the culture is here to stay. And they're very vigilant about it, protective about it. From the 16th century up into the 17th, 18th, that's when Islam came into Indonesia, and a lot of different islands are then made into Muslims. However, you have the Hindus who then come into Bali, and Bali has always remained, taking the word that you said, a cocoon. And then when colonialism came in, the Portuguese, the Dutch, and then later the Japanese, Bali has always been seen as a place that is not to be disturbed. Because again, the Balinese are so vigilant about keeping their own culture to the point where they're even respected by foreigners because of the incredible determination they have to preserve it. So yes, a lot of great atrocities happen around Bali to the Indonesians and to the Javanese. However, the Balinese to this very day are still very adamant in keeping it, making Bali a safe haven that's not to be disturbed, changed. Their determination has always been respected. The veneration they have towards their ancestors and towards their own tradition, because they have so much respect for it, other people respect it too. Some Indians, especially those living outside of India, they're lacking respect for their own traditions, and therefore other people lack respect for it too. Meanwhile, with the Balinese, because they have so much integrity and determination to preserve their tradition, other people catch up and other people adore that. And I think that's why Bali has always been such a great place for cultural tourism, because people come here and respect the Balinese because the Balinese respect themselves.
I'm sorry, I got so absorbed in that train of thought that I forgot to ask what we had noted down. First of all,
It's okay. I like this topic anyway, so this is great. Yeah, this is a great topic to get into.
India, or Bharat, was not just within the boundaries of what we know as a country. Bharat was an entire landmass that reverberated with this energy, with this indigenous knowledge and way of life.